factor. When you see the word factor, basically you are thinking the reverse distributive property. Reverse distributive property. In other words, this. Let's say I started off, let's do the distributive property again. Let's say I did 5 times 2x minus 8, which you know, if we do the distributive property, is 10x minus what? 40. Factoring is the same thing, except you're starting at the end and going back to the beginning. In other words, the directions will say this: factor 10x minus 40, which was what my answer was here. I need to go from this and end up with this. Okay? Which means, well, I should have done this a little differently. You have to look at each term and say, can I divide that by some number? I probably shouldn't have used this because this doesn't work out well, but maybe it will. What number goes into both 10 and 40? Tyler?
5.
5. I want to do 5. I should have not used this one. If I take 5 and I put my parenthesis in to get those two terms, this was a minus, so you know it has to be minus. Then you have to basically divide out. This time you multiplied, but now you're going backwards, so you have to divide. 10 divided by 5 is 2, and you have that x, and 40 divided by 5 is 8. You are starting with the answer going back to the beginning. Now, the reason I said this was not a good example is because you're supposed to take out the biggest thing you can. 10 and 40 actually have a bigger factor weight, which is 10. When you do this, you should always pick the biggest thing. Now, here's the question I have. If you take a 10 out, you still have that minus there. 10 times what is 10x? Just an x, or a 1x if you want. And then 10 times what is 40, which is 4. This is this thing factored. I'll do another one. Factor, let's just say 4x minus 10. When you factor that, you look at the two terms separated by that subtraction sign and say, what can you take out of those? What can you divide both 4 and 10 by? Amelia? 2. So you write that 2 outside of the parenthesis, and then you say, okay, 2 times what is 4x? Brant?
2.
Don't forget the letter, it's 2 times 2x. And then you put the minus 2 times what is 10? 5. This is reverse distributive property, or we call it factoring. Let me see if the book gives us another one here. Here's one. 8w plus 10. 8w plus 10. Factor that for me and tell me what you get. Tell me what you get when you factor that. What do you get if you factor that? Parker. What's that? What's that?
I haven't finished.
Are you stuck somewhere? Because it shouldn't take that long. Ask yourself, what number goes into 8 and 10? 2. So you write that number down. And you put a parenthesis because you're going to say 2 times what will give you that. 2 times what gives you 8w?
4.
4 what?
4w.
There you go. 4w. Plus, because that's a plus, and then what times 2 gives you 10? 5. Just that simple. Just that simple. I'm gonna give you a couple. I'm gonna write one. I'm gonna do one. Do the distributive property on this one. And then I'm gonna say factor this one. Do both of those problems for me. What problem did you get for both of those? And who am I? Carter A. I heard from you today. What you got?
For the distribute.
Yep.
6x minus 24.
6x minus 24 is correct. And for 18x plus 27, Faith?
3 in parentheses 6x plus 9.
Now, that is a factor, but I would say that probably, remember when you do this, you have to look for the biggest number that is going to both, and unfortunately 3 is not it. The biggest one that goes into both is, Brant? 9. And what do you get if you take 9 out?
2x plus 3.
2x plus 3. This would be the one you really gotta go with there. Alright, you always gotta think biggest. This actually is a factor, but we always wanna do the biggest one we possibly can. Yeah, we're gonna stop there. Unfortunately, there's more